Now with Mrs. Block for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Giroux, and to your colleagues for joining us today. The recent Auditor General's report on the ArriveCan scam found that it was extremely difficult to follow the money, and that Canadians, in her estimation, did not receive value for the money spent. We have the Procurement Ombudsman's reporting on an extreme lack of documentation throughout the procurement process, and on interesting practices like bait and switch. In your role as the Parliamentary Budget Officer, it is, your role to provide Parliament with the analysis not only on macroeconomic and fiscal policy, but also to help us in raising the quality of parliamentary debate and promoting greater transparency and accountability. And I certainly do appreciate the role that you play. As numerous investigations are undertaken and reports and audits continue to be tabled, what concerns you the most about the spending of this current government?
That's a broad question. I'd say what concerns me the most is the disconnect between the increased level of spending, which is a policy choice, but the disconnect between this and the performance indicators that don't seem to be markedly improving. So departments and organizations have to adhere to performance indicators. So they determine which indicators they'll be following, and they also determine the targets that they aim for. So over time, we've seen an increase in the number of public servants in public expenditures, but year after year, despite the fact that departments choose their performance indicators and the targets, they don't seem to be getting significantly better at reaching them. And I've used the analogy before with some of your colleagues that it's as if you ask the students, the students determine the topic of the test as well as the pass mark, but a portion of them still fail. And that's what worries me with the increased level of spending. So we increase spending, and as taxpayers, we provide more resources. But despite that fact, there are some sectors in the public service that are doing great, but others that seem to be trailing behind, unfortunately.
Thank you very much. I have to believe that you're also concerned with the amount of debt that the government is serving at this time. In your report, you mentioned that there is an increase of $3.2 billion in interest payments on unmatured debt, and I'm really interested in that. For this past fiscal year, this means that total interest payments on unmatured debt will reach $36.8 billion, and that came from your report. In that report, you also specifically refer to total interest payments on unmatured debt. My understanding is that unmatured debt is essentially debt that is not yet due. Is that correct?
Yes, but it's also excluding some other interest-bearing obligations, such as the obligations the government has towards the public pensions, the pensions of public servants. So the interest on the debt is what really matters, and it's expected to be $46.5 billion this year.
Yeah, so you kind of beat me to my next question, which was, are there further interest payments that the government is paying on matured debt, which is not included in the $36.8 billion number that you have cited?
Yes, so as I mentioned, interest on the unmet obligations or the obligations of the government towards pension plans of its employees also adds to interest on unmatured debt. So the debt servicing costs are what really matters, and they're expected to reach $46 billion, and 46.5, I think, this year.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mrs. Block. Mr.